episode of the UX Banter podcast. Our guest today is a design leader with over 12 years of experience in product design, digital innovation, and user experience. With a strong background in design leadership, she has a passion for building impactful solutions and guiding teams through user-centric methodologies and design thinking and design services. Her dedication to creating meaningful change through design has made a lasting impact across various industries. Please welcome User Experience Director at TrusTrace, Begga Hauksdottir. Hello, Begga.
Hi, Deshan. Thank you so much for that intro.
So I met you when you were at the UX India conference, and it was such a lovely way of connecting with world leaders that, it was just ways of making the connection and building on it. I really wanted to be part of the show and know more about you and the journey, because when you think about the two countries where we come from, India versus Sweden, there is always a big gap in the way the world is perceived. India is too crowded. Well, that is not a challenge, but it's a different experience. A life experience is different. And whenever I visit Sweden, it feels like the streets are empty. And that is something which always surprises me. So having you on the show to listen to that side of the story, that how being in a country where it's very little in terms of cultural ways that you get to interact with people. How does the empathy grow and build? And in India, we are so talkative. We have to talk with everybody around us, and it is just the reverse culture in Sweden where you tend to see that if we can stand 10 feet apart at least from one another.
Now, you're not selling Sweden very well here.
No, no, no. It's not about selling it right.
I
What
know, no, I get what you mean.
the
Yes,
idea is about the differentiator. So,
absolutely.
okay, we will talk more about the cultural differences.
Yes.
But first, let us see. So, how was your journey like? What makes you you as a professional, and what was the way and the
Yeah,
scene?
yeah, exactly. No, like you mentioned, I'm currently living in Sweden. I've been living in Sweden for about 12 years, so majority of my professional life is here. But originally, I'm born in Iceland, so that's in a country with more space and more distance and fewer people than Sweden. So born and raised in Iceland, I studied a little bit of design there. I think that's where I got into sort of the taste for design.
Uh-huh.
But I went abroad because I wanted to experience more of the world. So I went to Italy, and that's where I actually studied, at the time, graphic design. So I'm a graphic designer by trade, but I very early on realized that I lacked sort of the connection with who am I designing for. And that's how I got introduced to UX design. And this brought me to Stockholm. I studied in a school here called Hyper Island. And I don't know if you know about Hyper Island, but it's a little bit of like a social experiment. So you are sort of a class together and you get tasks from real life agencies. They come in with their business problems or companies, and you're basically put together in a group of people, designers, and told to solve it.
Uh-huh.
So there's no formal structure of sitting necessarily in classrooms. There's a lot of like reflection. Of course, you're introduced to the design processes, but sort of this way of teaching was so much more closer to the real world, the way we work today, that it sort of blew my mind. And that's where I got into UX. And then eventually I started working as a product designer. I joined at that time, fairly well-known consultancy called Fjord, which was about service design. They were service design consultancy. They later got acquired by Accenture. So I also worked for Accenture for quite a few years. And that sort of gave me this feeling of, service design, understanding users, working on meaningful projects and products. And I think that's what led me to where I am today. So I would say working as both a product designer and service designer, and starting to sort of, you were talking about interacting with people and understanding their needs. That's where I learned my craft, really.
Cool. I think one of the things, Fjord was a well-known name. I mean, still people do remember it. And while it was now part of Accenture, there is always this gap that comes with Indian IT is that Accenture is a big player here. So there is always this case where big IT companies acquire smaller studios or agencies and then they build upon it. So do you see any cultural shift happening during that period while it was a smaller one and then independent entity to part of the conglomerate?
Yes, of course. And I mean, we've seen this a lot, I feel, in the past 10 years, larger consultancies buying up smaller agencies because they see something unique in the skill set that those agencies have, their ways of working, etc. But this true challenge is how do you maintain and foster that? How do you not simply try to merge it into the way you think as a large organization? I, for my period, for example, at Fjord, I think they succeeded quite well. Fjord was left as their own studio for about 6 years until it slowly started to merge in. And yeah, like, there are challenges and there are benefits to it. I learned a lot during that period. I also got to work on, for example, corporate citizenship projects. So that's a program that Accenture has working together with NGOs to help them create digital services or with consulting. So I got to do fantastic projects with them. I got really inspired by a lot of people at, for example, Accenture in this case. So I think there's pros and cons to everything.
I think the biggest pro that you can get with working with the larger organizations is that the exposure to the bigger projects, which impact a lot of people in a way. So the government projects or NGOs, as you mentioned, but on the studio level, it is always there has to be certain limit that, that's the size of the project that you'll be working on. I'm not saying that everybody is doing that, but generally the big names, brings big business, and that's how it is dealt with.
I was just going to add, because I think this is super interesting. It's still relevant to, today I work at TrusTrace, for example, who is a company of 160 people. So it's not huge, definitely not at Accenture scale or some of those large consultancies. But regardless, the question still, remains, how do we foster, design internally? How do you take care of the design community in your company? And these are questions we struggled with and we're working on at Fjord. How do we keep our studio culture? How do we keep our designers creative, inspired? I deal with the same questions today, even in a different context.
So again, this is always going to be the case globally that anytime designers are coming on board or they are part of smaller, larger organization, that struggle is real and we have to keep on. About your journey, you mentioned Iceland, Italy, and Stockholm. Beautiful places to get inspired as a graphic designer. I would love to see your previous work as a designer, as the hands-on graphic designer to the UX one. Do you think that the cultural impacts that you carried from those experiences now reflects in anything that you're doing right now?
I think so. I think, I have a lot of the Scandinavian sort of both aesthetics, they're very close to me, but also kind of I'm very much to the point. I find it very important to be efficient. When we sort of collaborate or the design work we do, it's a lot about what are we trying to achieve here. And I feel that that aligns quite well with at least the Icelandic and the Sweden culture. So I feel like that I carry strongly with me. What I learned and sort of was exposed to in Italy was maybe more the creative side, being more. I studied in Milano, very close to the fashion industry, and I found that there was a strong belief in sort of the craft of design. They have a long history of industrial design, and those are functional designs as well, but we didn't have any history like that in Iceland. There was no sort of respect automatically given to the design practice.
So Scandinavian idea of design, that is always going to be a big history, and I think somebody should offer a degree in Scandinavia's aesthetics. It's always interesting to see anything that comes out of as the solutions. If you see, even right from the bottlings to if you look at the house architectures
Yeah.
and finally comes down to, well, the peak of it is IKEA, of course. They have made it. Finally, something that the entire world agrees with is IKEA furniture. Even though some people would like to go with more traditional approach, but that is the sensibilities which is coming from the Scandinavian region. So there is always this debate that says with simplicity we are killing off the creativity in design. We are simplifying too much design. So rather than having those beautiful parades or, like the station in Stockholm, isn't it that people complain about it? Now it's a black box. It used to be a beautiful building with lions sitting at the top.
Yeah, this is such a hard question, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to it. My point of view on it is maybe that, especially in the type of design that I do, which is a lot of B2B and it's enterprise and all those things, the beauty comes in sort of the efficiency of it, but also the if you can sort of be proactive in helping the user. And this is an old example, but I give it very often. It's so simple. It's Google Maps telling you that, oh, by the way, this destination that you're heading to, by the time that you get there, it might be closed. We just want to let you know. Like that for me is a beautiful experience because it helps me not have, a very frustrating moment when I'm standing in front of this store, like, I rush to get there, but they're closed. So I can totally agree with, designing lovely experiences, and you might use them a few times and it might be like an experience that you go through. Like if you go to a museum and you experience digital, exhibitions or art, that can be amazing to do. I love to do that with my daughter, for example. But when it comes to the practical tools we have, like what is the beautiful experience there? That is something that helps the user do their work better or thinks 3 steps ahead of it for them so that they don't have to end up in a bad place.
True. I think one of the great example of designs are the museums that they have come up with. So you can just look at both ways. So one is the architecture itself, where the museum is housed, where there are too many distractions because you're looking at the building first and then the artwork which is there. But then there are these modern museums where a building is just plays a backdrop and puts complete focus on the one thing they're delivering, which is the art at the center and the heart of it. And I think I mean always gets inspired by the way it is presented. So, well, and what about Italy? The entire Milan experience when it comes to graphic design, and does it translate into anything that we work on in a regular day?
Now, this is a long time for me, and I have a funny story about Italy, which is a private story that when I left Italy, I said that I don't actually want to work in Italy. I was not attracted to the sort of design culture I was seeing there at the moment. I was a very junior designer. It was very hierarchical, and I said that I don't want to work there. Today, I am married to Italian. So later on here in Sweden, through Accenture, I found my partner and the father to my child. So actually, Italy came back very strongly into my life. This time it's central Italy. So what I've taken with me from that period is that, I was exposed to graphic design, very fashion oriented, very editorial design. There was a lot of beautiful design there. But what I personally lacked was the UX part of it. When I found UX, that resonated so strongly with me that I was designing things to solve problems for other people. And that was not part of my education then. I think they probably updated the programs a bit, but UX was not introduced to me at that moment. So I really lacked that.
Well, yay to Italy, and think about callbacks that when things, you said never and you can never say never. Now you have to travel to Italy quite a few times, I think, every year at least.
Yes, and I love it. I'm so happy for Italy being back in my life.
Congratulations. And with that, I'm going to my sheet to ask you some rapid fire questions. Are you
Shoot.
ready?
Yes.
All right. So your favorite go-to pastime?
Favorite go-to pastime is actually listening to podcasts. I love listening to podcasts.
And a word do you hate hearing?
A word I hate hearing. I guess I hate hearing we have to reprioritize. I remember now.
Mine is that put that on hold for a minute. You want to get things done. You're a morning or you're a sunset person or a sunrise person.
I am a sunrise person. I'm a morning person.
So when you have a kid, you have to. I mean, there is no other choice otherwise as well, but that's that. Your favorite holiday destination.
Oh, now I put myself on the spot to say Italy, which
Doesn't
I
have
love
to
for
be. I mean,
holiday.
that is where families live. So family vacations aside, other than
Okay. Holiday, this is a hard one. I really like to travel, but in the past few years, we've tried to travel more sustainably. So what we can reach with train from Sweden whenever possible. So I would say, any beautiful mountainous country in Europe is definitely a holiday destination.
Switzerland, Austria.
Yeah, Northern Italy even counts. There's a lot of places.
Oh
Yeah.
yes, beautiful.
Mm.
I traveled there by road. Actually, me and my dad we did the entire Europe, and in Italy we went to in the south to the middle to so from Milan, Rome, and Venice and Pisa. So all the touristy things that we did on road, and it was quite good. Okay, so the food that you cook, your regular cooked food.
Yes, and here we are have split roles in the family. I actually take care of the Asian Indian side. So I
Uh-huh.
love to make Indian food, and we've also touched upon UX Indian. I have a team in India, so I go quite often to India, stock up on spices. Uh,
Uh-huh.
and then my partner takes care of the Italian, of course. So that's how we divide.
I'm so jealous because I love Italian food and you now have a at-home chef preparing meals so authentic. Okay, so your midnight snack.
Midnight snack. Oh, really should not snack at midnight. But if there's going to be one, it's going to be a toast with butter and cheese. That's also very Swedish.
Right. I think you did not mention IKEA meatballs anywhere in that conversation. I really love those, but you know, and that jam that comes
Oh,
from the
hjortronsylt is probably what you mean, like the cloudberry jam, the
yeah.
orange one. Yes, that
Yeah.
is very good. Mm.
All right. So are you a movies person or a books person?
It's very hard to choose. And also to my life right now, there's not a lot of time for other things. So I'm a little bit in between. I like to read a good book, but sometimes it's the couch and movie that happens.
So, okay, I recommend us both. One book that our listeners should read.
Okay, I will bring back an oldie, but a good book. It's not that old, but it's called Creating Effective Teams. So this one I read about 12 years ago when I was at Hyper Island. And it's all about understanding team dynamics, understanding where you as a group are. And I think anyone, even if you're not leading teams, if you are collaborating with others, this book would help you sort of understand the dynamics and what role you can take. So that would be my recommendation
For the book and for the
for the
movie.
book. And now the movie is that's really hard. I've been rediscovering Studio Ghibli with my daughter. So we've
Uh,
been watching a lot of Totoro, and it's just so beautiful. Like the
it is.
scenery are so beautiful. So that's yeah. I have a small kid. That's what I'm watching.
Yeah, but even the design aesthetics as they come from Studio Ghibli are really hard to find. And talk about food in the Studio Ghibli movies. It's so detailed, you can actually get hungry by just watching it. And the landscapes. And I think it's overall wholesome experience to watch those. My favorite one is Grave of the Fireflies, which is I think the saddest film of the lot and the least popular. I mean, it was a box office bomb, but it was sad. All right, coming back to the discussion, the book that you recommended about teams. Now, you have a team in India, you have offshore pattern in which you are working right now. And
Yes.
then you're working in a B2B structure at the moment. So what are the challenges that you face on a regular level, a regular basis, and how do you deal with them?
Mm, Such a good question. I think the challenges we face is obviously communication. It's not that we can't communicate and there's plenty of tools. We have different cultures in terms of communication, and that's definitely something that I have to learn in my role and sort of adjust to. And then I think in general, we were talking about prioritization. As a B2B company, SaaS also, we are in a fairly new area. So we do traceability. Right now, we focus on fashion, but not exclusively to fashion. So we help fashion companies collect data on their supply chain. And this is a sort of area that is forming. This hasn't been established. So in terms of our priorities as a company, that changes quite a lot. So if you have priorities changing and you have communication sort of challenges, then things can start to get a bit complex and a bit messy. So those are two things that we work on bringing a lot of clarity around.
But it's not just a cultural thing. I mean, that is the most common problem about communication, and that is why
Yes.
there is no such thing as over communication. You have to write like everywhere so that it is absolutely crystal clear what somebody means. And I mean, and when it happens with the requirements part, that is where the big challenges come in. That did you really understand what the requirement was? Then you have to like 20 times reconfirm. As they say, measure twice, cut once. Uh,
Yeah, exactly. And exactly. And also like I totally agree with you. It's not about culture really. It's about, how do we as the company that I am right now, how do we communicate? How do we bring clarity to each other? But also how do we foster the sort of culture of asking questions, following up. It's not, someone's job to tell you exactly how to do things. You should be able to take sort of as a designer and go and investigate and understand it yourself. So it's a lot about fostering that as well.
So, as a design leader, not as the manager, as a design leader, what are the qualities that you want your team to grow or build internally? And are you taking any specific measures to remedy that situation?
I think the qualities I want to grow within my team is back to being curious. If you don't understand something, and even if you think you do, because we sometimes think we've gotten something, but it's not really. We're not seeing the same picture. We haven't understood it at depth. So I think it's really back to curiosity and asking good questions. If you can sort of start pulling those threads and move your knowledge forward and explore things together with others, especially in the work that we're doing, which is quite complex and often quite uncertain. I think that is a core skill that we need to continue to develop. How you
Absolutely.
develop that is by a lot of giving examples and coaching and prompting, and I think constantly talking about it really helps. Of course you can do courses and stuff like that, but actually being curious is a mindset you have to train and foster.
And I think that is the only way to mitigate the biases and assumptions. As a designer, I think that is where, because if you have a bias that 100% you are walking into the trap of your cultural identity, you are walking into trap about knowing everything, and the solutions that you are working on may not actually fit. And I think that is the crux of it, that you rely on the data which is presented. So each time the entire circle is different, the audience is going to be different, and you have to ensure that you are meeting the criteria for their needs rather than your own. And that gap, whenever it is presented, even in the same organization, there are people who are perceiving the information differently. And to come to that part, being curious, you said it rightly. So I think there's always one difference which is going to be within people is, do you consider it as a job or as a career? That is a new mantra that I recently discovered, that whatever you are doing. If it is a career, you will take a different look at it. If you think it's a job, then you will finish and you go home, and that is not the right way to actually see a long-term picture of it's nobody's benefit, nobody's favor the way to treat things like just a routine job. But as creative professionals, it becomes our responsibility to stay on the line of staying foolish, staying curious, keep discovering things, knowing what is the new to come. I was in a fireside chat with, I think it was Sarah from LinkedIn Research. So they have created this repository because, of course, they have big data and they can actually benchmark the UX at their end. And they said that it is really hard to avoid biases. Even though we have the repo, we always want to recheck the data with a smaller sample to just validate what information we already have with the documents. Because every year or so, some new product will come into the market, and the research that you have done till that point will be a lot different or might change in people's perception about the things as they are going to happen.
Yes, I totally see that. And I think we have to, if I bring that back to then sort of a smaller team working together, we are going very fast. Like we have to design very quickly. We have to work with certain amount of knowledge and biases. But like you said, to sort of check that constantly, just to sort of, am I still on the right track? Am I still understanding? Are there knowledge gaps that have come up that maybe weren't there before? Just continuously not getting comfortable with what you know today.
Keep tasting the soup for salt and
Yeah,
spice.
exactly.
Wow. So, the new generation of people who are coming in, and if they want to follow your footsteps, what would be your advice to the young generation?
Very good question. Maybe not follow my footsteps. I don't know if that is such a good path, but I think some of the things that I've learned, which I can sort of share, is, try to test out a lot of things early. Don't necessarily go for the first comfortable position or job you get and just stay there. It took me a little time to find what I was passionate about. I was passionate about UX design, but also solving meaningful problems. And that meant that my career has taken a different direction, that I've gone into B2B, working on very complex problems. It's not sexy, like, looking at my portfolio today and the work that I do, I'm not always like, wow, that is such a great, beautiful, sleek design. But it's not about that for me. That's not what resonated with me. But when I started out, I was very sort of stuck on that, I should go and work in a specific company with this profile and it should be a known name. But I didn't actually like it. So I think expose yourself to a lot of things, dare to test out a lot of things early on, and you will find what resonates with you. Because it's not great to be unhappy at work for 40 years. Like that's not going to make good products or you happy either.
So, designing the life. I think there was a workshop was
Yes.
Stacy Serenik from IBM, and she was just on the podcast. I did an episode with her like a couple of weeks ago. So that was a workshop about, how to design your career, and it was quite inspiring. And those things people have to keep in mind, that keep networking, make sure that you keep engaging, listening to podcasts, reading a lot of books. I think that is, the generic way of for any career that you are in. But being a designer, I think that is the great advice, that not waiting for it and then just try out everything that you can ship. Perfection is always the enemy, isn't it?
Yes, I know, I know. And I spent so much time at the start of my career, like trying to come up with the perfect designs and just not realizing why they weren't working. And, it was about exposing myself to more, learning more, but also realizing that if you understand who you're solving this for, what their needs are, what their goals are, you can align your design to that. If you don't have that, you're kind of like throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Another food metaphor. I like it.
Since we are on the food,
Okay. So at TrusTrace, you are two teams in India and in Stockholm, or
Yes,
any
we
other
are
team?
mainly in India. We have a very small team here. Hopefully we will grow it. But when I joined just over a year ago, we already had 3 people in India. Now we've grown that team to 5.
Uh-huh.
So that's the current balance right now.
All right. And I think you mentioned that you are hiring people there or would be
Yes.
looking for it. And so,
Yes.
what is the best way of getting in touch with you about anything?
The best way would probably be LinkedIn. I am, though, just a disclaimer, not a huge LinkedIn user. I think I'm more of a LinkedIn browser than an active user, but it is kind of the easiest way to send me a message, but also to be very clear on what they ask or what the connection is that will help me prioritize it.
All right. And your Trust Trace page will be sharing any opportunities as they come.
Yes, of course. When we put out jobs, both I will post it on LinkedIn, but that's of course on TrustTrace as well. So trusttrace.com, and then we have our career page there. Everything, of course, goes through that as well.
Oh, I think it was a very enlightening and funny experience talking to you. It was funny in a way when we are talking about cross-cultural connections and misconnections that, backfire most of the time. And sometimes you have to, go and experience the places. So how was your visit to India? I mean, I have to ask, how many times have you been here? And is there anything that was surprisingly different than your assumptions?
Wow, such a question. I've been to India between 4 or 5 times now, probably around 5. The first time I came was actually maybe 6 years ago now for a friend's wedding. So I have a
Mhm.
very dear friend living in Mumbai, and when she got married, I came for her wedding and did the whole sari and that beautiful sort of be a part of that beautiful wedding ceremony, which was a fantastic experience. And then, of course, through my work now, I feel very privileged and happy to work so closely with India. If I were to choose a country, where I absolutely love, the food, but also, like the culture a lot, that is India. So I feel very happy to have a team in India and get to travel often to India. I think what surprised me, in terms of traveling, for example, when I've been visiting, we have an office in Chennai and Coimbatore, and then we were in Bangalore for the UX conference. As a traveler, I'm very, very independent. I like to go out and explore by myself. And my favorite way of sort of interacting with a new culture, new places, just to go outside and walk around and walk and see and just be with the people. And I struggled a little bit with that at the first, especially when I was in Coimbatore and Chennai. I didn't really know how to navigate. I went to some areas and my manager was like, Begga, why are you over there? You should not be there. Come back here. So I think that was kind of hard for me. I felt a bit restricted. Other things that have surprised me is maybe not surprised. I shouldn't have been surprised, but it brings me a lot of joy is the hospitality and openness of my colleagues in India to be invited to people's homes, whenever I come there, or to even be invited to someone's, first year child, like a birthday of their child, or someone's cousin's wedding, just because I'm there. And in Sweden, it's really hard to be invited to people's homes. Like we tend to keep a little bit of distance each other. So I really, really love that. That just makes my whole experience there so much more enjoyable.
Lovely to hear that, and happy that you have friends in the country and you are making more. So, with that, I would like to thank you very much for joining our podcast today. And